John Taylor, how's it going?
It's going great, Zach. How are you?
Doing really good. It's my pleasure to have John Taylor here with us. I'm going to be conducting an interview with him. He's recently moved to Utah, but he's studying environmental science and climate change here at Salt Lake Community College. So he's basically an expert at what he does. He knows his stuff. And so what we're going to be talking about is how the pandemic has really affected the environment and how it's just really negatively and positively affected the environment. So let's get started. So John, how has the pandemic affected the environment?
So, probably the biggest thing that we all see in our everyday lives is all the one-use, single-use cloth masks that are all laying around all along the streets, even in buildings, like in our schools. And that's been one thing that's really been detrimental to our environment. That's been a cause of the pandemic. And one way we can really help combat this is by making sure, when we use those single-use masks, making sure to throw them away after we're done with them, or buy a reusable mask, like a fabric mask, and you can use those over and over, you can wash them, and that's a good way to not waste all those masks and pollute all over the ground.
That's really good. So there's actually a study done by the New York Post, and it just described in the article that 1.5 billion masks will be polluting the oceans this year. And it's just crazy to think that how many are being put out and just causing the environment to be trashed. What parts of land were mostly affected by the trash that was disregarded for? I know that obviously the oceans, there was a study done and it said that there's actually going to be more masks than jellyfish in the ocean by the end of this year. And so, I mean, it's just tragic. But what other parts of land have been affected by it?
Yeah, oceans heavily, coasts where all the water washes up onto, tons of trash and masks have come and piled up onto these coasts. And also a big place where it's been really heavily polluted is in cities. One, because that's usually where people are most wearing these masks. That's usually where the virus is most active. And also since there's more people, it's just more people to produce this waste all over the city.
More people, there's going to be more masks there are going to be. That's really good. What trash has had the biggest effect on the environment? Obviously we know that masks are a big part. What are some other things? I mean, gloves. Are there gloves around?
People get those rubber gloves that you see in stores. When you go into a store, you can get those sanitizing wipes. And it's really easy to walk out of the store and empty your pocket and see that sanitizing wipe and just say, oh, I don't need this anymore. And toss it out. That's one thing that's also been wasted a lot. Another thing is just handheld hand sanitizer containers. It's once you're done with those, it's really easy.
It's so easy. People just throw it away.
If you drop it or just it's really easy to just pollute with those too.
Dang, dude, it's just depressing seeing how much trash is everywhere. Honestly, there's just so much trash everywhere. Is there anything that it can be done with the problem the pandemic has created? There's so much trash filling everywhere. Is there any incentives? Could we reward people for, placing bins? What's something we could do?
One big way, like I mentioned earlier, get a cloth reusable mask. You can just wash them over and over after a couple uses to make sure they don't get dirty or smelly or anything. And that will really stop the pollution of these single-use masks that we see all around. Another way, yes, we can just start recycling more with all the paper that those masks are made of. We can recycle those, and that will lead to less trash going into our landfills and piling up in our earth.
That's a good point. So a recent study, another site, I know I'm throwing facts out here.
That's all right.
So the Mediterranean has seen around 570,000 tons of plastic flowing annually this year. So if we can just stop littering and throwing trash around.
Just be mindful with the trash that you produce and just make sure you recycle or dispose of it properly.
That's a big point. So obviously some bad things have come from the pandemic, but also as I was doing some research, I found that carbon emissions and gas emissions have totally gotten better since airplanes, cars haven't been driving as much, not as much. Natural gas has been hurting the environment. I saw online that BOD levels increased by 30%, and the oxygen levels have been increasing, getting very better. So, I mean, what's that like in Salt Lake City? I know that the mountains have a different effect on, I don't know, the air quality, but can you just talk about that a little bit?
More recently, things have been starting to open back up. Cars have been driving around more. Flights have been getting produced, so a little bit more pollution has been being created.
Yeah.
But if we look back to when we first got into lockdown in around March and April, carbon emissions went way down. I was in Portland, Oregon at the time during lockdown, and it was just really interesting to see how much clearer the skies were at night.
Yeah.
We don't usually see stars like that.
You can see the stars. It's a great view, you know.
And that's because no one was really driving cars around, or flights were pretty much all shut down.
Yeah.
And that's one way that the environment has been positively affected by the pandemic.
That's a great point. So, like, honestly, do you think we can bounce back from this?
I do, and I think if we all come together as one, we can all produce less waste, and be more mindful about our environment, because this is the only Earth we got, and I think if we all come together, we can really make a big change.
Heck yeah. I think sometimes when we think of, throwing our masks away and disregarding for them, like, we think about ourselves and think about how, like, our streets are being taken up, but also, I mean, the ocean has so many species, and have fish, like, have habitats been hurt by that.
Oh yeah, and if you look recently, our coral reef population has really been hurt very badly, and you can just see it all over social media. There's been reposts about these different organizations going out and cleaning up our oceans, taking out these massive bags of garbage from our oceans.
Yeah.
And even there have been experiments done where they go down to these coral reefs and use like man-made structures to help these coral reefs grow back again. And it's been very interesting to follow.
That's crazy. I mean, that's just, I feel bad for those animals, and I just think that it's very important that we clean up the environment, we dispose of these masks properly, and also realize the appreciation that our air quality's gotten better. I got one more question. So did certain countries get hurt worse than others? I mean, we live in a first world country. Are other countries being hurt worse? I mean, are they not as educated about recycling? Can you just go into detail about that?
Oh yeah, so more civilized countries really got hit hard by this pandemic because of the population density in cities, and it's just been really easy for that virus to be passed around, and this has led to a lot of that mask waste, which is built up in all these different countries. But obviously in these rural places in our countries or all over the world where not a bunch of people live, those are some places where it hasn't been affected as much, because there's not as many people to get the virus and to be affected by this pandemic.
That makes sense. Well, John, thank you so much for coming
Thank you for having me.
And safe travels back home.
Thank you.
Brother.